Imagine leaving behind everything you know, your home, your family, and even your homeland, without knowing exactly where you are going. What kind of faith is needed to take that step? This was the story of Abraham, a man called to change the course of humanity. Abraham's story unfolds in a world filled with polytheistic cultures, where people worshipped multiple gods and lived under customs strongly influenced by idolatry and pagan practices. Abraham grew up in Ur of the Chaldeans, a prosperous city known for its architectural and cultural advancements. However, Ur was also a center of intense idolatry, with temples dedicated to the moon god, Nana. It was in this environment that Abraham lived, surrounded by beliefs that did not acknowledge the true God. The society of that time was tribal and patriarchal, with family and lineage being fundamental to people's identity and security. The fact that Abraham was called by God to leave this context was radical and challenging. He was to abandon the protection of his clan and trust entirely in a divine promise. One day, the unexpected happened. The Eternal appeared to Abraham with a clear command: "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household and go to the land I will show you." Genesis 12 verse 1, this command was followed by an extraordinary promise: "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Genesis 12 verse 2, this promise seemed impossible. After all, Abraham was 75 years old, and his wife, Sarah, was barren. How could an elderly couple give rise to a great nation? Imagine the emotional dilemma Abraham faced: remain in the comfort of his homeland or embark on an uncertain journey, relying solely on the word of a God who was revealing himself to him. Abraham did not hesitate. Demonstrating unwavering faith, he gathered his belongings, called his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and set out into the unknown. He left behind not only his home but also the pagan beliefs and practices that dominated Ur. This decision reveals a powerful aspect of faith. Often, trusting God requires letting go of control and walking into uncertainty. Abraham did not know where he was going, but he knew who was guiding his steps. By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Hebrews 11 verse 8, upon arriving in Canaan, Abraham built an altar and worshipped the Lord. This act was symbolic and profound. In the midst of a foreign land, surrounded by peoples who did not recognize the true God, Abraham chose to consecrate that place to the Eternal. He was declaring that his trust was not in circumstances, but in the God who had promised to guide him. This attitude teaches us that, even in the face of uncertainty, our first response must be to seek God's presence and trust that He is in control of the situation. Shortly thereafter, Abraham faced his first great obstacle: famine struck the land. To survive, he had to go to Egypt, a territory known for its wealth but also for its dangers. Abraham, fearing for his life, asked Sarah to say she was his sister, fearing that the Egyptians would kill him to take her. This hasty decision caused problems with Pharaoh, who, upon discovering the truth, returned Sarah and ordered Abraham to leave Egypt. This episode reveals a human and fragile side of Abraham. Even with admirable faith, he still struggled with fear and insecurity. However, God remained faithful and protected Abraham, fulfilling His promise to bless him. Abraham teaches us that true faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision to trust God despite it. Like Abraham, we are challenged to step out of our comfort zones and take steps of faith when everything seems uncertain. And you, are you willing to leave behind your securities and trust in the promises God has for your life? Take a moment today to reflect on something you need to place in God's hands. Pray for courage to trust Him, even if the path seems uncertain. In the next chapter, we will see how Abraham faced family conflicts and even greater challenges while trying to live according to the divine promise. Don't miss it. After the difficult experience in Egypt, Abraham returned to Canaan wealthier, with many possessions and a large number of servants. He also brought with him his nephew Lot, who was growing in influence and prosperity. Success, however, brought new problems. Both Abraham and Lot had so many flocks and servants that the land could no longer support them together. This led to constant conflicts between their herdsmen. So Abraham said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right, if you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Genesis 13 verses 8 to 9, Abraham demonstrated humility and trust by allowing Lot to choose first, trusting that God would take care of him regardless of the territory he received. Lot chose the fertile lands of the Jordan Plain, near Sodom, a city known for its wickedness and corruption. This decision revealed a materialistic and reckless side of Lot, who saw only immediate benefits, ignoring the spiritual risks of living close to a decaying society. Abraham, on the other hand, remained in Canaan. After this separation, God renewed his promise to Abraham, "Lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever." Genesis 13 verses 14 to 15, this promise strengthened Abraham, reminding him that his inheritance did not depend on territories chosen by man, but on the sovereign plan of God. Shortly thereafter, Lot was captured during a military invasion involving 4 powerful kings. When Abraham learned that his nephew had been taken, he did not hesitate. With only 318 trained men, Abraham launched a bold rescue operation, surprising the enemies at night, freeing Lot, and recovering all the stolen goods. This episode highlights Abraham's courageous and selfless character. Even after Lot's selfish choice, Abraham did not let that stop him from protecting his family. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. Genesis 14 verse 16, on his return from the rescue, Abraham was met by Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blessed Abraham and offered bread and wine, prophetic symbols that would later be associated with Christ's sacrifice. Abraham, recognizing Melchizedek's spiritual authority, gave him a tithe of all he had gained. This gesture reinforces that Abraham understood his victory came from God and not from his own strength. "And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Genesis 14 verse 20, in a vision, God reaffirmed his promise to Abraham, guaranteeing him countless descendants, compared to the stars of the sky. However, Abraham expressed his anguish, reminding God that he still had no children and that his heir would be Eliezer, a servant in his household. God responded with an even more powerful promise, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." Genesis 15 verse 4, God then established a powerful covenant with Abraham, using a symbolic ritual in which animals were cut in half, and a torch of fire passed between them, symbolizing the divine commitment. This covenant did not depend solely on Abraham's faithfulness, but on the unchanging faithfulness of God himself. Despite the promises, Sarah still could not bear children. Impatient, she suggested that Abraham have a child with her servant, Hagar. The plan worked, and Ishmael was born. However, this hasty decision brought painful consequences. Family conflicts and resentments between Sarah and Hagar intensified, revealing how human impatience can generate suffering. Even so, God remained faithful to the promise of giving a son to Abraham and Sarah. Time passed, and Abraham continued waiting for the fulfillment of the promise of a son with Sarah. Although God had already assured him that his descendants would be numerous, reality seemed to contradict this promise. When Abraham was 99 years old and Sarah was 89, God appeared again and reaffirmed that she would give birth to a son. "Your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." Genesis 17 verse 19, Abraham laughed. The idea of having a child in old age seemed absurd. Sarah also laughed when she first heard this promise, demonstrating her disbelief. Shortly afterward, 3 mysterious visitors appeared at Abraham's home. He welcomed them with hospitality, offering water to wash their feet, a good meal, and rest. During this encounter, one of the visitors reaffirmed, "About this time next year, your wife Sarah will have a son." Genesis 18 verse 10, Sarah, who was listening behind the tent, laughed again. But God heard and asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Genesis 18 verses 13 to 14, these words echoed as a powerful reminder that God is sovereign and faithful. At the appointed time, just as God had promised, Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Abraham named the boy Isaac, meaning laughter, remembering that this miraculous event had turned initial disbelief into undeniable joy. The birth of Isaac brought great happiness to Abraham and Sarah, but it also reignited family tensions. Ishmael, Abraham's son with Hagar, began to mock Isaac. Sarah became deeply upset and demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Abraham was distressed, for Ishmael was also his son. However, God reassured him, "Do not be distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Genesis 21 verses 12 to 13, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away, trusting in God's promise. In the desert, when Hagar and her son were about to die of thirst, God heard Ishmael's cry and provided a well of water. He guaranteed that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation, thus fulfilling yet another divine promise. This period marked a significant turning point in Abraham's life. Isaac, the promised son, grew before his eyes, while God demonstrated once again that his promises are fulfilled at the right time. With Isaac's growth, Abraham's life seemed finally stabilized. He had seen the fulfillment of the promise and was enjoying the joy of watching his son grow up. However, one of the most difficult moments of his life was still to come. God tested Abraham with a surprising and painful command: "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Genesis 22 verse 2, this command was devastating. Isaac was not only the beloved son, he was the very fulfillment of the divine promise. God's request seemed to contradict everything he had guaranteed. How could Abraham obey? Despite the anguish, Abraham rose early the next day, prepared the materials for the sacrifice, and set out with Isaac and 2 servants. After 3 days of walking, he saw Mount Moriah in the distance and instructed the servants to stay behind. Only he and Isaac would continue. "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Genesis 22 verse 5, Abraham's faith was revealed in these words. He did not know how, but he trusted that God would find a way to fulfill his promise, even if it meant resurrecting Isaac. Abraham placed the wood on Isaac's shoulders and continued in silence. Along the way, Isaac asked an innocent question that must have pierced Abraham's heart: "Father, the fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Genesis 22 verse 7, with a choked voice and eyes full of tears, Abraham answered firmly, but feeling the weight of every word, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Genesis 22 verse 8. When they reached the top of the mountain, Abraham silently built the altar. Each stone he placed felt like a blow to his heart. He then arranged the wood and, with trembling hands, called Isaac. The young man, without resistance, allowed himself to be tied. Abraham could not bear to look directly into his son's eyes, but the sound of Isaac's heavy breathing filled the air. With a trembling hand and tear-filled eyes, Abraham raised the knife. His mind was overwhelmed with conflicting thoughts. Why, Lord? Wasn't this the son you promised? Sweat poured down his face as he lifted the blade. Every second seemed like an eternity. A deep silence took over the place. Time seemed to have stopped. The sound of the wind among the trees was the only thing breaking that moment. Then a voice echoed from the heavens, Abraham. Abraham. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Genesis 22 verses 11 to 12, Abraham fell to his knees, tears freely streaming down his face. He had trusted, and God had proven himself faithful. When he lifted his eyes, Abraham saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. He took the animal and offered it as a sacrifice instead of Isaac. Abraham called that place "The Lord will provide," Jehovah Jireh, reaffirming his trust in divine faithfulness. After this act of faith, God renewed his promise to Abraham, "Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore." Genesis 22 verses 16 to 17. This event became one of the greatest symbols of faith and obedience in biblical history, highlighting Abraham's willingness to fully trust in the sovereignty of God even when everything seemed senseless. Time passed, and Sarah, Abraham's wife, died at the age of 127. Her death marked a moment of deep sorrow in Abraham's life. However, even in the midst of mourning, he once again demonstrated his faith and wisdom. Abraham sought to ensure that Sarah had a dignified burial. He went to the Hittites, the local inhabitants, and asked them to sell him a field with a cave to bury his wife. Although the inhabitants offered the land for free as a sign of respect, Abraham insisted on paying a fair price, thereby ensuring that the place would permanently belong to his family. So Ephron's field in Machpelah near Mamre became Abraham's property, in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. Genesis 23 verses 17 to 18. This act shows how Abraham not only trusted in God's promises but also made practical decisions to consolidate that future. The marriage of Isaac. As he grew older, Abraham became concerned about finding a suitable wife for his son Isaac. He summoned his trusted servant and made him swear not to choose a wife from among the Canaanite women, but to seek someone from his own kin who worshipped the Lord. The servant then departed toward Paddan Aram, Abraham's hometown. Upon arriving there, he prayed for divine guidance. "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham." Genesis 24 verse 12. While he was praying, Rebekah appeared. She was the granddaughter of Nahor, Abraham's brother. Demonstrating great hospitality and humility, Rebekah offered water to the servant and also volunteered to draw water for all his camels, a clear sign that she was God's chosen one. After recounting everything that had happened, Rebekah's family recognized that this was the Lord's plan and allowed her to go with the servant to marry Isaac. Upon meeting him, Isaac welcomed Rebekah with love and brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. The marriage brought comfort to Isaac, especially after the loss of his mother. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Genesis 24 verse 67, Abraham's final days. Abraham lived a long and full life. He married again, to Keturah, with whom he had several children. However, to protect the divine promise that would be fulfilled through Isaac, Abraham sent these children away and ensured that Isaac remained the principal heir. Abraham died at the age of 175 and was buried alongside Sarah in the cave of Machpelah, which he had acquired years earlier. His sons Isaac and Ishmael came together to bury him, demonstrating that despite difficulties and distances, the family still maintained deep bonds. Abraham lived 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Genesis 25 verses 7 to 8, the story of Abraham left a powerful legacy. He was called God's friend, James 2 verse 23, and became the father of faith, an example of trust, obedience, and perseverance for all generations. His choices, both in victories and failures, reveal that faith is not about perfection but about trusting the God who fulfills his promises, even when the path seems uncertain. Abraham's journey was not merely a story of grand deeds or moments of unshakable faith. It was a human journey, marked by fears, failures, and difficult decisions. Yet what made Abraham an eternal example was his willingness to trust in God's promises, even when everything seemed uncertain. Abraham did not see the full fulfillment of the promise during his lifetime. He died without witnessing the multitude of descendants God had promised. Nevertheless, his faith was enough for him to press on, believing that the Eternal would fulfill his word at the right time. The impact of his life extended through generations. God fulfilled his promise, transforming Abraham's descendants into a great nation and, centuries later, sending Jesus Christ, the true descendant who would bless all nations of the earth. Galatians 3 verse 16. Abraham's example continues to inspire millions of people to live by faith, trusting that God is faithful to fulfill what he promises. His story reminds us that even in the face of doubts and difficulties, the most powerful step we can take is to trust in the one who knows the end from the beginning. Just like Abraham, we are called to trust, obey, and persevere, knowing that God always fulfills his promises at the perfect time. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot to continue sharing powerful biblical stories that build faith. And if you want to see how this same faith impacted the lives of other biblical characters, check out the video linked in the description and on the card. You won't regret it.